If a man ignores you, do not beg for his attention, because the moment you start chasing someone who is pulling away, you stop being attractive to them and start abandoning yourself. Most women think the secret is getting him to text back. It is not. The real power is becoming the woman who stays calm, confident, and unforgettable even when someone else becomes distant. And today, you are going to learn exactly how to do that. Have you ever noticed how the more anxious you become about someone's silence, the more your entire mood starts depending on their attention? You check your phone more often. You replay conversations in your mind. You wonder if you said something wrong. And suddenly, one person's behavior starts controlling your emotional state. If you have ever felt that, this message is for you. Because what you do when someone pulls away determines whether you lose your confidence or become even more magnetic. Silence does not always mean rejection, even though the mind immediately wants to interpret it that way. When a man suddenly becomes distant, replies less often, or changes his energy, many people instantly assume they did something wrong. They begin replaying conversations in their head, searching for mistakes, analyzing every text, every word, and every moment for hidden meaning. The emotional reaction becomes stronger than the actual situation itself. But human behavior is far more complicated than a simple yes or no, interest or disinterest. People withdraw for many reasons that often have nothing to do with another person's worth. Some men pull away because they are overwhelmed with responsibilities, stress, uncertainty, or emotional confusion they do not know how to communicate properly. Others become distant because they are emotionally immature and struggle with consistency even when they genuinely like someone. Some people need space when they are processing emotions, while others fear vulnerability and unconsciously create distance when connection starts becoming real. None of these behaviors automatically mean you are unworthy, unattractive, or not enough. The problem begins when silence triggers emotional fear. Fear creates urgency. Urgency creates chasing. And chasing usually comes from the need to restore emotional certainty as quickly as possible. That is why people send multiple texts, demand reassurance, or try to force clarity immediately. But when actions are driven by anxiety instead of self-respect, the dynamic changes. Instead of creating connection, it often creates emotional pressure. Emotionally intelligent people understand that another person's temporary distance is information, not immediate proof of rejection. They observe behavior without instantly collapsing emotionally around it. They give situations room to breathe instead of reacting impulsively. This does not mean becoming cold, detached, or pretending not to care. It simply means remaining emotionally balanced enough to avoid turning uncertainty into self-destruction. The strongest mindset during moments of silence is understanding that your value does not decrease because someone else becomes inconsistent. A person's inability to communicate clearly reflects their emotional habits, not your worth as a human being. The moment you stop interpreting every moment of distance as evidence that you are not enough, you begin protecting your confidence instead of surrendering it to someone else's temporary behavior. Chasing attention may feel natural when someone becomes distant, but it quietly changes the emotional dynamic between two people. The moment someone senses that you are desperately trying to hold their focus, the interaction stops feeling balanced. Attraction thrives when both people feel emotionally free, not emotionally pressured. When a woman begins over-texting, constantly checking for replies, over-explaining herself, or seeking reassurance every time communication changes, she unintentionally communicates fear of losing connection. That fear becomes more visible than her actual personality. People are naturally drawn toward energy that feels calm, centered, and secure. Confidence is attractive because it creates emotional ease, but chasing attention creates tension. Instead of allowing the relationship to grow naturally, it starts feeling forced. Every message begins carrying emotional weight. Every interaction starts feeling connected to the need for validation rather than genuine connection. Over time, this can make the other person feel emotionally responsible for maintaining your confidence, and that pressure slowly weakens attraction. What many people misunderstand is that emotional value is not created by trying harder for someone who is becoming inconsistent. Emotional value comes from self-respect, boundaries, and emotional stability. A woman who can remain composed during uncertainty communicates something powerful without saying it directly. She communicates that her entire identity does not depend on one person's attention. That energy instantly changes how she is perceived. When someone pulls away and you immediately chase them, you remove all space from the interaction. Space is important because it allows reflection, curiosity, and emotional clarity to exist. Constant pursuit eliminates mystery and often creates emotional exhaustion instead. But when you stay grounded and continue focusing on your own life, the energy feels different. You appear emotionally secure rather than emotionally dependent. This does not mean playing games or pretending not to care. Emotional maturity is not about becoming cold or manipulative. It is about responding instead of reacting. There is a difference between expressing genuine interest and abandoning your dignity to maintain someone's attention. One comes from confidence while the other comes from fear. A person who values themselves does not beg to be noticed. They do not force conversations, force closeness, or force emotional availability. They understand that real connection cannot be built through pressure. The strongest presence in any relationship is often the person who can care deeply while still remaining emotionally in control of themselves. Confidence is often misunderstood as loud behavior, emotional detachment, or acting like nothing affects you. But real confidence is much quieter than that. It is emotional control. It is the ability to stay calm, grounded, and self-respecting even when a situation becomes uncertain. When a man ignores a woman, many people expect confidence to mean ignoring him back, pretending not to care, or trying to appear emotionally unavailable. But true confidence is not performance. It is emotional stability under pressure. When emotions take over, people begin reacting impulsively. They send emotional messages too quickly, overanalyze silence, seek reassurance constantly, or allow one person's behavior to determine their self-worth. This usually happens because the fear of rejection becomes stronger than emotional self-control. The mind starts searching for certainty immediately, and in that emotional urgency, people often abandon the very qualities that made them attractive in the first place. They stop acting naturally and begin acting from anxiety. Emotional control changes that completely. A confident woman feels emotions deeply, but she does not let those emotions control her actions. She can feel disappointed without becoming desperate. She can notice distance without losing her identity. She can want connection while still protecting her dignity. That emotional balance creates a calm and grounded energy that people naturally respect. One of the most attractive qualities in any person is emotional security. Someone who remains composed during uncertainty feels emotionally safe to be around. Their energy is not chaotic, demanding, or overwhelming. They do not create pressure every time communication changes slightly. Instead, they observe calmly, communicate clearly when necessary, and maintain their own emotional center regardless of another person's behavior. This kind of confidence also protects a person from emotionally unhealthy dynamics. Without emotional control, people often tolerate disrespect simply because they fear losing someone. They become willing to overgive, overchase, or overcompromise in order to keep attention. But a confident woman understands that maintaining self-respect is more important than forcing connection. She does not measure her value through someone else's consistency. The reason emotional control is so powerful is because it communicates self-trust. It shows that a woman does not collapse emotionally the moment something feels uncertain. She trusts herself enough to handle situations with maturity instead of panic. That kind of calm presence stands out because most people react emotionally without thinking. But the person who remains centered during emotional uncertainty naturally appears stronger, wiser, and far more attractive. A man notices the energy of a woman who remains centered instead of reactive because emotional energy is felt long before it is fully understood. People may not always explain it logically, but they can sense when someone is emotionally grounded and when someone is emotionally overwhelmed. When a woman reacts impulsively to distance, inconsistency, or uncertainty, the interaction immediately becomes emotionally heavy. Her focus shifts from genuine connection to emotional survival. Every message carries tension, every silence feels threatening, and every interaction becomes loaded with the need for reassurance. That energy changes the atmosphere between two people. But a woman who remains centered creates a completely different emotional experience. She does not panic the moment communication changes. She does not immediately assume rejection or begin chasing clarity from fear. Instead, she stays emotionally composed and continues living her life with confidence and balance. This calmness communicates strength without needing to announce it. It signals that her emotional state is not controlled entirely by someone else's behavior. Men notice this because emotional stability feels rare. Many interactions today are driven by emotional extremes, constant validation seeking, and reactive behavior. Someone who can remain calm under emotional pressure naturally stands out. It creates a sense of ease around them. There is no unnecessary drama, no emotional chaos, and no feeling that every small change will turn into conflict or emotional pressure. That grounded energy feels peaceful, and people are naturally drawn toward peace. Remaining centered also creates mystery and curiosity. When someone expects emotional chasing and does not receive it, they often begin reflecting more deeply on the connection. Space allows emotions to settle and awareness to grow. But when reactions are immediate and emotionally intense, there is little room for reflection because the focus becomes managing emotional tension instead of appreciating the connection itself. This does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending to be unaffected. A centered woman still feels disappointment, confusion, and vulnerability like anyone else. The difference is that she processes emotions with maturity instead of letting emotions control her behavior. She understands that temporary distance does not require immediate emotional collapse. That emotional discipline communicates high self-worth. It shows that she values herself enough not to lose control simply because someone else becomes inconsistent. A man notices that energy because it feels different from emotional desperation. It feels secure, balanced, and emotionally healthy. And people are naturally attracted to those who know how to remain emotionally steady even when situations become uncertain. Self-respect is far more attractive than over-explaining, over-texting, or trying to prove your worth because attraction is deeply connected to how a person values themselves. The moment someone begins begging for attention, constantly seeking reassurance, or trying to convince another person to see their value, they unintentionally communicate insecurity instead of confidence. Even if the intentions come from care or emotional attachment, the energy behind those actions often feels anxious rather than grounded. People can sense when someone is interacting from fear of losing connection instead of genuine emotional stability. Over-explaining usually happens when a person fears being misunderstood or abandoned. They feel the need to clarify every emotion, justify every reaction, and make sure the other person never pulls away. But when communication becomes excessive and emotionally loaded, it can create pressure inside the connection. Instead of allowing feelings to develop naturally, the interaction starts revolving around emotional reassurance. This shifts the balance of attraction because one person begins emotionally chasing while the other begins emotionally retreating. Overtexting creates a similar effect. When someone repeatedly reaches out, despite inconsistent effort from the other side, it removes emotional space from the relationship. Space is important because it allows anticipation, curiosity, and reflection to exist. Constant communication driven by anxiety often weakens emotional tension instead of strengthening connection. It makes interactions feel emotionally forced rather than natural. Trying to prove your worth is perhaps the most damaging pattern because it places your value in someone else's hands. A person starts believing they must earn love through endless patience, effort, emotional availability, or sacrifice. Instead of recognizing their own value internally, they begin depending on external validation to feel secure. Over time, this creates emotional exhaustion because no amount of reassurance permanently fixes insecurity that comes from self-doubt. Self-respect changes the entire energy of a relationship. A woman with self-respect does not feel the need to convince someone to appreciate her. She communicates honestly, but she does not beg for consistency. She expresses care, but she does not abandon her dignity to maintain attention. She understands that mutual effort is necessary for healthy connection and that love should not require constant emotional proving. This kind of energy is attractive because it feels emotionally balanced. It shows maturity, confidence, and inner security. A self-respecting woman does not panic when someone becomes inconsistent because she knows her worth remains the same regardless of another person's behavior. That calm confidence naturally creates respect because people are drawn toward those who value themselves without needing constant validation from others. The goal is not to win him back. The goal is to remain powerful, calm, and deeply connected to your own life because many people lose themselves emotionally the moment someone pulls away. Their focus becomes entirely centered on restoring the connection, fixing the distance, or getting attention again. Every action becomes emotionally tied to whether the other person responds, returns, or shows interest. In that state, personal peace disappears because emotional stability becomes dependent on someone else's behavior. Instead of asking, "What kind of relationship do I deserve?" the mind becomes consumed with, "How do I make this person choose me again?" That mindset creates emotional imbalance. The relationship stops being about mutual connection and starts becoming about emotional validation. A person begins sacrificing dignity, boundaries, and self-respect simply to feel wanted again. They overanalyze messages, monitor social media activity, and interpret every small interaction as hope or rejection. Slowly, their emotional world becomes smaller because it revolves around one person's attention. Remaining powerful means refusing to let someone else's inconsistency control your identity. It means understanding that your worth is not measured by whether another person stays, leaves, texts back quickly, or suddenly becomes distant. A calm and emotionally grounded woman does not see temporary rejection as proof that she is not enough. She sees it as information about compatibility, emotional maturity, and relationship dynamics. Being deeply connected to your own life changes everything because it creates emotional abundance. When your happiness comes from your purpose, friendships, health, passions, growth, and self-respect, one person's behavior no longer has the power to emotionally destroy you. You can still care about someone while remaining connected to yourself. That balance is incredibly important because healthy relationships are built when two emotionally whole people come together, not when one person depends entirely on the other for emotional security. Ironically, people often become more attractive when they stop chasing approval. There is something powerful about someone who continues moving forward with confidence regardless of uncertainty. Their energy feels secure instead of desperate. They are not trying to force love or manipulate attention. They simply understand that real connection cannot be built through emotional chasing. The strongest mindset is realizing that your life should continue expanding regardless of who chooses to stay or leave. When you remain calm, emotionally centered, and fully invested in your own growth, you stop treating love as something you must fight for at the cost of yourself. So, if a man ignores you, remember this above everything else. Your value does not decrease because someone else becomes distant. Do not chase attention so hard that you lose your peace trying to keep someone interested. Do not abandon your confidence just to avoid temporary uncertainty. And do not measure your worth through someone else's inconsistency. Real power is emotional balance. It is staying calm when others expect panic. It is maintaining dignity when emotions tempt you to chase. It is continuing to live fully, confidently, and purposefully even when someone's energy changes. Because the most attractive person in any relationship is not the one begging to be chosen. It is the one who already knows their value without needing constant reassurance. And the moment you stop treating silence like proof that you are not enough, everything begins to change. You think more clearly. You move differently. You stop forcing connection where effort is missing. You stop shrinking yourself for temporary attention. And you begin creating relationships from self-respect instead of fear. The right person will never need to be convinced to value your presence consistently. So protect your peace. Protect your confidence. Protect your self-respect. Because someone who is truly meant for your life will recognize your value without needing you to abandon yourself just to keep their attention.